garment, and he senses it. He senses something, and that's really amazing. And he finally finds her, and he says, "Woman, your faith has healed you." And she walks away absolutely, for years she's been going to doctors and the priest there, and she just simply couldn't get rid of this disease, or this ailment, I should say. And then there's another time when Jesus is up on a mountain with three of his good friends, Peter, James, and John, and he comes down. And his disciples, the rest of his disciples, the 9 other disciples are down there. And they're trying to follow exactly what Jesus has done. And there's this young boy with this demon, and they just can't deal with the situation. They can't resolve it. They can't cast out this demon. And Jesus, just as soon as he arrives, he's able to cast out this demon. And they go home, and they ask Jesus, "Why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we do that?" And if you turn in Matthew chapter 17, verse 20, he gives them an answer similar to what he gave to them when they were sitting on the boat, clinging to the side of it, fearing for their lives. Matthew chapter 17, verse 20. And he says this. He said to them, "Because of your little faith," Matthew chapter 17 and verse 20, "because of your little faith," that's the reason they couldn't do it. He says, "For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." And what Jesus is saying is faith the size of a mustard seed. Think of some of those seeds you might have handled or seen, or if you've been into gardening. That amount of faith, that just a small amount of faith is able to move whole mountains. Incredible faith. But there's times when I would describe where faith goes a bit wild and a bit weird. I don't know if you've ever been in those situations. I was reading in the Record, but I also read in some of the newspapers as well. There was an Adventist couple in England. And interestingly enough, he was actually a nurse. The husband was a nurse. He worked in one of the hospitals. But for some reason, they believed that it was a lack of faith to go to the doctor for medical support. And which is really bizarre, because he was actually working in a hospital. But they believed that. And so they didn't go themselves, but they also didn't go with their little baby boy. And their little baby boy got a bone condition called rickets. Very, very easy to resolve. It's a vitamin D deficiency, and could have been easily fixed by the medical staff. And yet they didn't take. And even the wife said to the husband, "Look, I think we really need to take this boy to the hospital." And the dad said, "No, we have faith in God. God heals. It's a lack of faith to go to the doctors." And in the end, that boy died. He died of a condition that simply, as I understand, Ruth Allen could probably correct me, just simple injection or whatever with vitamin D could have healed the boy. And they ended up in prison for 3.5 years. And that's what I say is when faith goes a bit wild and weird. Yeah? But that's not the only case. Just unless you think it's only for Adventists. I was at Macquarie University in Sydney recently with a good friend of mine, Tim. And we were at one of the stalls, the orientation stalls, meeting new students. And in the stall beside us was a couple of Mormon missionaries. Dave and Elder Despain. They don't tell you their first names. But anyway, so we got chatting to them. They wanted to know a bit about Adventism. And at the end, they said, "Well, can we meet up further?" I guess being typical missionaries. And so Tim and I sort of looked at each other and we thought, why not? We'll give it a go. We'll do the missionary kind of thing ourselves. So they started to come, and as per normal, they want us to read the Book of Mormon, and very, very interesting kind of document. But at the same time, Tim and I were reading about Mormonism on the internet, some of the Wikipedia kind of stuff as well. And what I was reminded about is that Mormons, Latter-day Saints, members of the Latter-day Saints Church actually wear this, what they call temple garments. Have you ever heard of this? It's temple garments. It's a very unflattering, unfashionable, old-fashioned underwear that they're given underneath their clothes. And so you're issued with it when you are endowed in the temple. And so you can only buy it from a Mormon temple. You can only get it from the Mormon places where they produce them. And they have these little symbols on them as well. And they believe that it will protect them from, spiritually protect them. So they believe it will protect them from temptation and harm as well. And there's some Mormons who believe that they have survived car crashes and fires because of this Mormon underwear. And that's when I start to say, I think that's when faith goes a bit wild and weird. You know what I mean? I don't believe that they saved they escaped the car crash because they were wearing this type of underwear. That's my perspective. But unless you think I'm just sort of having a bit of a dig at the Adventist couple in England and the Mormons, picking on them. I was leading out in a Sabbath school class when I was going to university, and the topic was faith. And I very eloquently argued for the fact that if we really had faith, we shouldn't get insurance. And so I was talking about it, telling them, and it's incredible because there was a big kind of discussion that should we actually pay for insurance? And then somebody who was a bit wiser than me later on said, do you actually wear a seatbelt when you drive? Do you actually put it on? Is it a lack of faith to put on a seatbelt? It was a very interesting question. And I guess that, that discussion. So even for me, there's times when maybe even my sort of concept of faith got a bit wild and weird too. So I'll admit to that as well. But when you reflect on these situations, when you reflect on the Adventist couple and other situations like that, sometimes you have to agree with atheists like Richard Dawkins and the late Christopher Hitchens when they say that faith is a dangerous thing. I don't know if you've heard Richard Dawkins and those guys, but effectively they say it's a very destructive force in this world. And what they're saying is that we need to have cool, rational reason as the basis of how we live. And there's times, as I said, when Christianity seems to even fly in the face of reason, rationality. It can really seem for someone who is not brought up with Uncle Arthur, Bible stories, and things like that. When they read it can sound really, wow, this is absurd and nonsensical. And so we go back to the fact that we should be rational. We should be reasonable people. We should not give in to the claims of faith claims. This just blind kind of faith. But I guess the other thing as well is this, is that we can sort of say, oh well, the Adventist couple in England and in the Mormons and that kind of stuff. But sometimes it gets really quite close and personal. It comes really close to what we believe in the Bible. For example, what about six-day creation? What about the global flood? When you have all of these really intelligent, high-powered professors of science and biology at the universities who are saying, that we all evolved and that the universe started in the Big Bang 14 billion years ago. And we pick up the Bible, and the Bible says God created in 6 days, and suddenly you're starting to say, how does rationality and reason actually, what are we supposed to do? Do we throw it all out? Do we just say, okay, yes, we follow the line of thinking, the line of rational thinking of those scientists? But I want to dig a bit deeper into this. Are you prepared to go there with me? I want to dig a bit deeper than this. And in particular, I want to dig into this rationality, this reason concept. In 2012, the global atheist community had a convention, the Global Atheist Convention in Melbourne. And all of the big names were there. Unfortunately, Christopher Hitchens wasn't, because he had passed away from cancer the year before. But the title, the name of the convention was A Celebration of Reason. A Celebration of Reason. And more recently, just last year, I was part of a debate with the Sydney Atheists, as Joseph mentioned. And I just checked, in preparation for these talks, I checked the website of the Sydney Atheists, and on their website they say, "We represent reason. We represent reason." That's what they're here for. And indeed, if you go back in history, there was a period in history called the Enlightenment, which has another name, which is the Age of Reason. And so all of these guys are saying, we want to be reasonable, we want to focus on reason, and not be caught up in faith and superstitions and all of those kind of things. But we have to ask a very important question, and that is this: why are atheists so confident in human reason? Do you follow me? Why are atheists so confident in human intelligence? And how do they know that human intelligence and human reason will actually get them to the point where they want to go? Do you follow me? It's a very interesting question, because the issue is this: if you're an atheist, basically the only explanation you can have is that we all evolve. That's what they say. And the question then is that, well, what reason do we have to trust in human intelligence in our minds if we evolved? You see, if we evolved, then we started off as, way back, we started as just a bunch of molecules in a primordial soup, and we slowly sort of evolved and developed and became, different kind of animals, and finally primates, chimpanzees, and so forth and so on. And we became us. But the issue then is this: why would we trust our reasoning? Why would we trust our minds? Why would we trust what the atheists want us to do? And the fact is that there is no reason why you should trust in human reasoning, because the whole point is that evolution works on survival, mutations and survival, effectively genetic mistakes and survival. So our minds have been shaped for the purpose of surviving. That's a practical thing. They haven't been shaped for being able to identify and grasp real true belief. Real true belief. It's an incredible reality. And what this means is that if we did evolve, we have no reason to trust, put any confidence in our thinking ability to the extent that we want to. In fact, Charles Darwin himself admitted to this. He said this: "But then with me the horrid doubt always arises where the convictions of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind if there are any convictions such a mind?" And I want to say this, is that Charles Darwin's concerns and doubts and worries are actually very valid. They're very valid. In terms of the issue of why can we trust our thinking. What it's saying is this: that an atheist's faith and trust in human reasoning is unjustified within their own paradigm, within evolution. Compare this with the biblical account. I want you to turn with me to Genesis chapter 1, where we were reading with Joseph last night. I want to read with you what does the Bible say about human thinking, human abilities. It's Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse 26 and just read a couple of verses there. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. What an amazing picture. We are created in the image of God. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is that God has created us with some key attributes, key characteristics that are qualities of God himself. And these are things like intelligence, consciousness, the ability to be creative, the ability to make plans and to carry them out. That's what it means to be made in the image of God. It also means that he gives us a dominion of rulership that he also has as well. That's what it means to be made in God's image. So what it's saying is this, is that intelligence is a gift from God. It's a gift from God. And the reason why he did this, for a number of reasons. One of it is this, that God gave us intelligence to find out what the universe is like. It's like exploring the playground that God has given to us. Isn't that amazing? You know, this vast universe that God's created for us to enjoy, God not only gave us to live in, but to find out about as well, to learn about, to enjoy. So what this is saying really is this: any trust that we have in human intelligence and reason is actually based on the fact that God created our minds. Do you understand what I'm saying here? It's actually based on the fact that God created our minds. And you know, the truth is this, is that atheists have faith as well. It's just that they put it in a different area. We put our faith, or I should speak for myself. I put my faith in God and the Bible. Atheists put their faith in human intelligence and reason. We put our faith in something. You can't get away from faith. But the fact is that their faith in human intelligence is actually based on the fact that God created us in his image. Do you follow what I'm saying here? It's very, very, very powerful. And so it means that the atheist's confidence in reason is actually an unacknowledged faith in God himself as well. You know, true science is actually based on God's existence. The fact that God created the universe with an intelligent structure that we can follow, that we can understand, and then he gave us the intelligence to learn about it as well. A very famous scientist that I'm sure most of you would know, Albert Einstein, said this, that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it's comprehensible. The mystery is that this universe can actually be grasped by us as well. But when you are a Christian, when you're a Bible-believing Christian that believes in God, that believes that we are made in God's image, suddenly that mystery, that conundrum, that thing which cannot be explained is answered, because God has made the universe and he's made us with the ability to answer it. And so the fact is this, that true science is based on faith in God. True science is based on faith in God. And so, you know, no matter what, no matter how intelligent professors and lecturers may be at university, no matter what they tell us, if you dig down into it, the only reason that we can do science is because of what God has given to us. And that gift is intelligence. It's an amazing, amazing reality. But I also want to say this, is that there are times when faith takes us, leads us, encourages us to go on beyond even where understanding what we would normally think is understanding as well. You know, faith is not just saying, okay, well, there's a intelligent creator of the universe out there, and I know that he's designed this universe with an amazing structure. He's given me this intelligence. Okay, away we go, and we can ignore the fact that God is there. True faith, just like true science is based on faith, true faith goes deeper than that as well. True faith is this deep trust in God, in his love, his power and ability to make a difference in our lives, in His goodness as well. You know, faith is willing to trust in God in spite of the odds, in spite of the challenges that we face. And one of the best examples of that I have found in the Bible, I know of in the Bible, is the life of Abraham. Is the life of Abraham. And it's so amazing that, in fact, 4 of the authors of the New Testament actually use Abraham as the key example to describe what faith, righteousness by faith, is really like. He's the kind of epitome in many ways. And of course, we know that Jesus was the ultimate person. But when the New Testament authors are going like, we want to find a real, authentic human being who had failings and wasn't perfect, but had faith in God, they go back to Abraham. He was a man of faith. He didn't do it all right, just like us, but he had faith, incredible faith. But there was one day when God came to Abraham and asked him to do something which made absolutely no sense at all. Absolutely no sense at all. And it's found in Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. God came to Abraham. God came to Abraham and he said to him this. Genesis chapter 22 and verse 2. He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." Go and offer your son as a child sacrifice, is what he's saying here. And I would have to say this, that the stories of the Adventist couple in England who let their son die because they refused to take him to the doctors, the reason they did that is because they believed God would heal him. And even the Mormons with their temple underwear and things like that, pale in comparison with this story we have of God telling Abraham to go and sacrifice his son. It's one thing to believe that God will save your son without you taking them to the doctor. There's another thing which you actually believe, that you heard God say to you, "I want you to kill your only son." It just doesn't make sense at all. And you know, if I was Abraham, I guess a bit like Hosea as well, I would really question whether I heard the voice of God. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would say, I just don't think that was the voice of God. I have faith, I trust the Almighty Creator of the universe, but that wasn't God. And I truly believe that night during which time Abraham was reflecting about it, I believe he went through all of those things in his mind. I think he was wrestling with it, trying to understand what on earth is God trying to tell me here. And then in the morning, he resolved, he made up his mind. He said, I know the voice of God, I'm familiar with him, and I just know that was him. And it doesn't make sense, it goes beyond understanding, but I'm willing to follow through with it. And so, you know, so he heads out. He's got 2 servants and they're just heading away. God actually said to them, "I'm going to show you where the sacrifice is going to take place." He didn't know where he was going. And so they're walking along and Abraham's still stewing in his mind. And it gets to this very poignant point in the story as well, because suddenly Isaac turns to his dad and says, "Hey Dad, wait a minute. You know, we've got the wood, we've got the matches, but where's the lamb?" And the answer that Abraham gives is so powerful. You know, he says, you know, God himself will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. God himself will provide the lamb for the sacrifice. And I ask you, you know, how did he know? What on earth was he saying here? You know, he knew he was taking his son to be sacrificed. And yet he was saying, you know, God will provide the lamb to be sacrificed. And so, you know, you would know the story. They climb the mountain, they get to the top, they make this makeshift altar, and then suddenly it all becomes clear to Isaac. Isaac is the lamb. Isaac is the lamb. And, you know, we put ourselves in Abraham's shoes, stewing all night. Now, put yourself in Isaac's shoes. You know, this does not make sense. This does not make sense at all. And, you know, it's that amount of faith, you know, you can see the knife starting to fall, and suddenly in midair, the angel comes from heaven. It's amazing. This split second, the angel says, stop. And they go and they find the ram that God has provided. It's an incredible story of faith. Incredible story of faith. And the book of Hebrews, in chapter 11, the chapter of faith, the hall of faith, gives us an incredible insight into what Abraham was actually thinking, what he was thinking about when he took his son. Why on earth would he do anything like that? Hebrews chapter 11, very, very powerful verse here. In verse 17, Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 17. It says this, but by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, linking us back to Genesis, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promise was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. This was the son of promise. This was the son that God had promised Abraham. And yet God had then went on to say, you know, I want you to offer him up. But go on. It says, he considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. And this is the incredible reality. You know, he had a faith that was bigger than just his own experiences and his own understanding. He had a faith. He said, I know that God is powerful enough to raise the dead. And so I'm willing to go all the way through. I'm willing to go all the way through with this, recognizing, you know, what God has asked me to do because I have faith. You see, Abraham had faith that goes beyond normal understanding because he had an understanding of God that went beyond the normal. He had a faith in God that went beyond the normal. And you know, that gives me courage as well. That really gives me courage. Because, you know, when I am faced with some of the challenges, the faith challenges that we all can wrestle with, just like Abraham did. And things like, you know, do I believe in six-day creation? Do I believe in a global flood? That Noah was saved through the ark? Do I believe in the second coming of Jesus? Do I believe in the final judgment? Do I believe in the fact that there will be created a new heavens and the new earth? I'm faced with the same question that Abraham was faced with. You know, I'm faced with a question, do I know God well enough? Do I know him well enough to put my faith in him, even in the face of what is known and called to be normal? How familiar have I become with God so that I can say, yes, that is, I can trust him at all times, even in those big challenging issues as well. And you know, I have one major advantage. We have one major advantage over Abraham, and that is this. You know, Abraham put his faith in God, that God was able to raise the dead without ever having evidence that God had ever done that. Do you realize that? He believed in it, but he had never seen it, he'd never heard about it, he never knew that God could do it. But for me, this is where I have the advantage. You know, there's a historical account that we have in the Bible that Jesus was raised from the dead. That God has the power to raise people from the dead. And Jubes was just asking me before, you know, when we talked about that question last night, where is the evidence that God exists? And there's a number, I shared those with Jubes. But if you want to know the key to understanding that God exists, that he loves us, that Jesus is really who he claims to be, that God has the power to raise us from the dead, and that we can have eternal life. It's in the resurrection of Jesus. It's in the resurrection of Jesus. You know, true science is based on faith. But my faith in God is even more powerful. My faith in God is even more powerful. I believe in the biblical six-day creation. I believe in the second coming of Jesus, not in spite of the evidence, not in spite of the evidence, but because of the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus.